Thanks for having me, us, Universum. I'm just going to put this in my back pocket. I'm a bit of a new boy at Universum, actually. I joined last Monday, so the depth of my Universum experience is quite limited. It's more from being a fanboy of Universum for years and years, and now I pleaded with them to give me a job, and they gave me one, which was very nice of them. I'm going to talk through, so Universum is probably known by many as the organisation that produces rather substantial reports and research data on opinions about brands, who are the most attractive brands in the world, in the opinion of students, our next generation of talents, etc. And that sort of builds itself up to be awards and rankings structure with the world's most attractive employers awards. And now we're bringing it to the UK. So we literally are walking to the UK to do localised work for the first time, because Universum is largely known for running these research campaigns and then activating employer brands and EVPs off the back of that data. And the reason they hired me is because we want to do some more work in the UK and expand some of the stuff and localise some of the stuff that we do with large organisations and translate some of the more UK ones. So that's me. I'm suntan then. I think I'm clearly not that time of year anymore. So look. What we want to present to you over these for the next 15-20 minutes or so is some of the findings of our DNI Index Survey. So over the course of 2019, or a 6-month period in 2019, Universum did a survey to 250,000 students around the world. It's a nice big data set to get our teeth around, which is really, really nice, and also from a great, wide and diverse opinion set coming from some 12 of the most vibrant economies in the world, shall we say. So we're going to look around what was in that, some of the things that we've learned from that, some of the data behind that. We're going to look at what it seems to mean, what does DNI mean for this next generation as they come in to our workplace and starting making an impact. What's their expectation? What are they feeling? Presenting a list of the employers, which I'll show you the screen of that as well, and briefly look at kind of what are the things that typically the companies who are seen to be the most attractive employers by students in relation to DNI, what are the factors that seem to be quite consistent as to why they get chosen. So one of the questions that was asked, so first, before we go into the DNI, the student research piece, another piece of work, research we do is called EB Now, Employer Branding Now. It's run by Richard Mosley, who people might have seen before. This is sort of his area, and this is interviewing 2,000 of the largest organisations in the world, trying to understand where their priorities sit. And clearly, to set the scene, what is noticeable here is very clear, is all of a sudden it's a very important thing in the way our organisations are thinking. It's generally considered a high priority in most countries. Germany don't seem to be that fast in comparison to other countries, but certainly in we are in the UK here, basically we're talking about 50% of organisations consider a high priority in the work they want to do. Measure that against the companies who are in the world's most attractive employer index, those top 100 companies in the world. Their average positioning of this was 85%. 85% of those organisations said this is a priority in this organisation. I think I'm talking to a room that kind of gets that, of course, and understands the importance, which is why we're here, clearly. But of course, I think this demonstrates that attractive organisations, globally attractive organisations, consider this a huge priority, not a partial priority. And amongst those people, and amongst those organisations, when they're looking at what some of the key things they're trying to get from their EVP when they communicate their EVP, which of course is work that we do for some of the largest organisations around the world, over the course of the last 3 years, the focus towards the diversity inclusion, along with other areas that are much more about the heart and belonging and relevance for people across the organisation, has grown significantly. We're now talking, only 3 years ago, it probably made up 23% of people's content in relation to their EVP. Now we're talking about 37%, so it's quite significant growth. The UK average is 32%. So again, so it's, not only is it a growing expectation for the business and a challenging area for business, it's also the way that we communicate who we are as a business in our EVP is now being dictated much more by trying to deliver and communicate our diversity and inclusion strategy. Increasingly, I'm looking beyond the obvious as well. So one of the things we've seen as well is as this subject gets wider and wider, I think we've all noticed this, that what was diversity inclusion in a bucket a few years ago is now opening up to so many sort of areas that we need to consider, we need to take care of, we need to research as organisations and understand when we consider this. So we're now seeing much more recognition of different areas of diversity. It isn't just a single phrase anymore. There are so many layers to think about and consider. And some of the leading organisations, and probably some of them are in the room, maybe, I've already started to make action about this and thinking about moving away from the elitism of hiring and focusing much more on the capacity to provide a workforce that is diverse with different thinking and different mindset and different skill sets as a consequence of it. And so the organisations which would probably traditionally and still will have elements of kind of traditional nature about them are starting to develop and trying as hard as they possibly can to develop the way in which they hire people. So looking at some of the questions that we asked the students around the world, and this is quite a generic one because this is probably a bit of an opener really for them in a way, but it's just that general feel. Do you think the companies in general are open to DNI? So this is a general feel. When they look at the marketplace and consider that, what do they think? Well, this is across the world kind of data. UK sits at 51%. Of UK students, 51% of them feel when they look at the marketplace, people are trying to do something right about DNI amongst the organisations that they recognise. I'll allow you to make a decision as to whether 51% is a good or negative answer, but certainly I bet it's significantly more than it probably was 5 years ago, so I'm sure we're on the right track. And when we ask them to encapsulate the challenge of all of this and the evolving state that we're working towards and trying to meet with all this kind of agenda, is when we ask them to give us one word that represents DNI in their minds, what would it be? Of course, what we see is some really strong words there in the middle as well, but equally, we've got to get over this challenge that a lot of the words are negative as well. People are writing negative things about the concept of DNI. So we've got words like discrimination, hypocrisy, excessive politics, buzzword, there's corruption, there's conflicts, there's all sorts of things that have got negative elements about DNI, and that's something we've got to solve as organisations in a way that we communicate what it means to our organisations and how we're going to deliver on that to the benefits of existing employees and to the attraction of employers coming in. So communication is very, very important, otherwise perception can be negative or potentially so. And so from a definition of diversity across different generations, what we've kind of looked at here is not just our data, but some other data as well, to try and work out, right, what is the difference between what's important, what is DNI recognised in which different age groups and different generations, etc. And what we're finding it much more leaning towards now, and therefore making it harder for us now to try and understand, is that all of a sudden in the personality is becoming the factor that people are considering as a essential trait of DNI, whereas probably in years gone by that was less the focus. It was much more focused around some of the things that were more obvious to us, the kind of the plain speaking kind of DNI stuff. So this is a fascinating shift that looks around who we are as people and human beings rather than quotas and buckets and categories and all that kind of stuff. It's much more about the heart. And this is fascinating. This is something we have to start thinking quite potentially about as we start to think about how do we communicate and build effective DNI communication and strategy inside our organisations. And this is probably amplified a little bit here in this kind of iceberg effect that, again, these are very clear areas of definition of DNI, age, ethnic, gender, very obvious, very clear ones that we know and have touched on and have tried to address for a number of years now. but it's the only tip of the iceberg, because they come 50% of the definitions. 86% of them consider cultural as the primary definition of diversity. Cultural rather than box-ticking categorizations, etc. So, and that again creates interesting challenges, because all of a sudden start to talk about emotions and differences and feelings and belonging, rather than about equality in simple kind of word. There are much more to think about in the way that when we consider what people are thinking about this. This is, just to kind of clarify, I mean, I think this is what we pretty much would know, but cultural diversity in the workplace is when companies are open to hiring employees from all sorts of different backgrounds, regardless of race, religion, and culture. So it's quite a broad statement in any case, but I think that focus on the phrase culture, which is often seen as a negative phrase, you know, we have to address and consider in our organisations, how do we consider the word culture? Is it a good word? How do we add to culture? Do we embed culture? Do we augment culture with more of the same? What do we do? And that's where culture is such a... I was at an event yesterday, a recruitment event yesterday, where there was a fierce and ferocious argument about the subject of culture. I mean, genuinely angry people in the room, the concepts of the word culture. Because, of course, often it means similarities and same, and we're just all going to hire people exactly the same. But obviously, when you go beyond that, and that's what we've got to work out with our organisations, is what does culture mean to our organisation? How do we implement and assess and understand culture and make it a fair, balanced and inclusive process? It's a hard one. I'm not just trying to say it's easy. It's not. This is some of the quotes, and again, just to kind of give you a feel of the balance of opinion that sits inside our next generation when we think about diversity, etc. Authenticity is a word that comes up a lot, and interesting people beyond, say, racial appearance was the response of somebody. I think the most off-putting thing is when companies appear to just see my race or gender as a statistic. They should see it as a way of improving the company, and I think this is a mindset shift. We all know we're kind of striving for, but people don't want to be singled out for being who they... Again, go back into buckets and categorizations. They don't want to be a statistic. They want to be somebody who has value and performance to the company. I don't want to feel like I'm special or different from my ethnicity. I want to be hired and promoted based on merit. Precisely the same sort of scenario. And again, it's part of the challenge we've got to work out. But this is some of the words of, this is some of the voice of the people coming into our marketplace and what they're kind of feeling about this is. These are just some of the things they kind of looked out for as well as their response. The things they're looking for inside of businesses to make sure that they feel as though they're the kind of places they would want to go and work at in our modern environment, where they're very focused on a more broad, spread and open environment. Here's some examples out here of people taking that in sort of inclusive, cultural and also diverse approach to the way in which they track talent and the way in which they look after talent inside the organisation. I think this is Netflix here. Netflix have got zones where people can feel and be exactly want to be with people like them, creating communities inside organisations to make sure that they don't feel alone in global organisations and a large organisation. And we've also got, and of course, the neurodiversity is a vast matter. I don't know whether it's been covered today at any point, but I know it's such a hot topic at the moment, the whole neurodiversity elements, and how do we embrace neurodiversity inside our organisations. SAP and Microsoft are examples of companies who have identified the qualities and the skill set that is probably in some degree quite unique to people with neurodiverse conditions, and how it adds value to their organisation. And that those are two organisations that have embraced things like autism to add value and add performance value inside the organisation. And some other areas as well, but I won't go too much into these because of the time. But I'm sure these get shared afterwards probably anyway, it certainly can be. So what about the fears? So we've heard some of their opinions, but what are also about their fears? So students' fears going into their work life. Look, I mean, there's no particular standard out thing here, but it's more about measuring the next workforce in comparison to our current workforce, if you like. They worry about underperformance, that's clearly, comparatively, so they're worried that they won't be what the organisation wants them to be. They're worried about personality. It goes back to the thing about the people thing and the importance of like-minded people in the organisation, etc., that they feel as though they belong. and starting to be less focused on things like development and career opportunities. That's maybe just indicative of the age they're at and all that kind of stuff, but it also goes against some of the trends that tell us that the next generation is entitled and wants everything to happen to them and progress at speed. Actually, this suggests this isn't the case. That's not their priority. They want to be somewhere where it means something, that they feel valued, with the right kind of people around them. And so which of the following aspects of your future employer's culture should match your personality? This has got quite a clear winner. And I don't think we ever think about this enormously when we think about our package of what kind of employer we are. When we deliver things like employer branding and REP, do we think about how friendly our organisation is? Very often. We don't often, because it sounds maybe a little bit low touch, a bit soft in a way. But actually, if the next generation is thinking, I want to be in a place where I'm around people that I feel comfortable with, that I can perform the best around, all that kind of stuff, all of a sudden, the personality of the people inside your organisation and what they deliver is really, really important. And what they stand for is important, because the second part is looking at the second one is the company's view on equality and diversity. So these are really significant factors standing out above some of the more things that we've probably been used to for years and years and years around structure, environment, brands, etc. These are the things that, yes, they matter, but not as much as the feeling of personal belonging inside an organisation and acceptance. Another example of best practice, but I think there's more the message around this that I think everybody quite liked when McDonald's did this campaign that said that we don't hire this, we don't hire that, we don't hire that. But the whole idea, of course, is about the fact that we need to be thinking of people not by the buckets or categories or names at which who they are. We should be focusing on the skills and abilities and capabilities to add value to our organisation, and in that will come a degree of diversity. I've had 2 fingers. I think it was the right way around, was it? DNI matters to younger generations compared to older generations. This is Pew Research data, this is not our data, this is just comparative data in the UK that demonstrates that it's seriously important to the next generation. We've got to focus on this in the future. We may have grown in an environment where we didn't think this was very important, and we may have grown in organisations and companies that didn't think this was important. The next generation, particularly in the UK, think this is hugely important. We need to do something about it. I'm conscious of my time, so I won't go too much into those. But of course, this is also looking at the campaigns that say we want to know who you are as a person, going back to the thing about personality, friendliness, human factors, and all those sort of things that people want to feel comfortable where they work. Even if it's in a massive corporate global organisation, they want to know that, they want to feel as though that they're joining a place that says, we're interested in who you are as a human being. What have you got to offer as a human being, as well as an employee? And I think that seems to be the tone of what we're getting from a lot of the research into our kind of next generation. And we have to consider it, because this is the new workforce. Very, very quickly, the DNI Index, when we collate all this data, we collect, for the DNI part of the study, we measure the response on the company's respect for its people, company's commitment to diversity, inclusion, support for gender equality. They're the sort of buckets. They're equally weighted in measurement, and then that comes to produce DNI Index score, which then ranks companies in their DNI. Some of the people in the room here probably are on. This was the results of it that came out at the back end of last year. These are considered to be by 250,000 students in the world. Obviously it's global, so a lot of these are very big global companies. I think some of you are probably in the room. These are the ones from business students who are seen to be the most diverse and inclusive employers in 2019. And just to break it down differently to STEM, because there are different, people with different kind of approaches to this. This is the STEM equivalent of it. This can be shared around afterwards if people wanted to look at this in your own time. Feel free to do so. As of this year, we are 4 months into a 6-month program of doing this specifically with the UK now. So this is our world map. We are now in the process of doing the UK one, because we want to find out who is the most attractive employers in the UK, both from an attraction point of view, but also from a DNI point of view as well. And so we've reached about 20,000 students, I think, so far in the UK to try and get this agenda. And we're also later in the year going to do a professional survey on the same subject, so we can capture the views of the existing professional fraternity as well as the student fraternity. These are very, very quickly, these are the things. I I don't think any of these things surprise you, so I don't need to go. These are the reasons why, the common factors we found amongst the organisations that are succeeding well and are high on the index. These are the things they've got. There's a culture, there's a business case, there's a clear strategy, and have strong leadership engagement, etc. And importantly, they measure and track it. It isn't a tick box exercise to do this quarter that we'll come back to again in 2 years and measure it again. This is ongoing. Our cultures evolve faster now than they've ever evolved, and therefore we have to evolve and track and continue to measure it. And that is that. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Steve.